LSU newly named number 1 yesterday in the AP poll that was published Sunday afternoon. Bama number 2. They'll square off in Tuscaloosa on Saturday afternoon. We have some weekend winners for you coming up here in an hour. Lots of sound to get to from Saturday night and yesterday afternoon inside the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. But it is a really cool spot to be in right now in Louisiana when you talk about your football teams and what they're accomplishing, how they're playing. LSU with an unconventional win, I guess, to what they have laid out through the first 7 weeks. But like you said in headlines, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, going through a season, if you're a championship caliber team, you have to win those games because you're going to be in them. At some point, a team is going to take you off of your calling card, take your identity away from you. And I thought that Kevin Steele, Auburn, had a phenomenal defensive plan. And for LSU's part, they made mistakes that they routinely were not making in the first 7 weeks of the season, whether it be special teams, whether it be 12 penalties for 118 yards.
Those are the two big ones, in my opinion. I'm not on as much in this conversation I think we're about to have, but I'm not on as much with the wrong conservative coaching decisions were made or that LSU's offense wasn't good. Like, the only parts of the game that I thought were objectively bad were the two you just named. The penalties, this was the least penalized team coming in this game, LSU was. So obviously that is something we haven't seen this year. And the special teams are just flat out bad. And I mean, it was every facet of the special teams.
Well, everybody.
Yeah.
It was Cole Tracy, it was Avery Atkins, it was Derek Stingley, it was Derek Dillon, it was Clay Moffitt. I mean, you could go down the list of names that just – Is it Aaron Moffitt?
It is Aaron.
Yeah,
Clay is – wait, what did Aaron have?
On the punt, when Moffitt, Dillon, and then
when they had the chance to down it.
Down it inside the 5, and all three of them were just looking at each other.
You could throw that on about half the punt team there. So they had that play, the Stingley fumble. Von Rosenberg had like 3 punts go like sub 35 yards. Even Avery Atkins had kickoffs returned and then went out of bounds. Well, he's from Auburn. My guy was angry. Somebody finally returned it. Yeah. He wanted to get a shot in. He never gets to. So, no, look, it's a weird place to start, but I do think that those are the only 2 points where LSU was unequivocally bad. And I guess why I bring that up is because I don't agree with a lot of the reaction that I've seen from LSU or from people criticizing LSU's style of play at the end of the game. A lot of people think that LSU went conservative instead of aggressive at the end of the game. Why didn't you ride the horse that got you here and all those things, right? The problem with that, in my opinion, and I'm not saying there's not a conversation there, because there absolutely is. I don't like people saying unequivocally that the offense should have been playing aggressive there, because what it does, in my opinion, it ignores the context of the game. You want to compare this to 3rd and 17 at Texas? You want to compare this to Florida? You can't. LSU's offense was dominating those games. They were unstoppable against Texas. They were unstoppable against Florida. That was the best offensive performance I've ever seen against Florida. Well, this game, it was anything but that. I mean, this was the first time that LSU's offense looked human, and that's because you have an Auburn defense that was particularly well-suited to stopping them, and you have Kevin Steele come up with a crazy creative game plan. I mean, he ran formations he has never run before. A lot of great articles are up about it. I read a couple of Brody Miller's yesterday. They're on The Athletic right now. But he came out in a 3-1-7, like a 3-2-6. So 3 D linemen, 2 linebackers. Sometimes 3 D linemen, 1 linebacker, exotic. 7 defensive backs. So they were doing everything they can. And Auburn may be the only team that can do this. They're the only team that has a line like Clemson's D line of last year. They were doing everything they can to banking on their D linemen being able to stop you, and then they could just throw a million guys into coverage and try to shut down the trios. And it worked, at least for the first half. And then you saw LSU say, okay, well, you want to put 5 people in the box? We're going to run the ball. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and also another key, and we mentioned before the games that even if Auburn's defense had initial success, I feel so much more confident in this staff to adjust with in-game adjustments. And you saw what they sped up the tempo to try to wear out the D-line, and it absolutely worked. I mean, you had them faking injuries, which, by the way, is completely normal. Everybody does it, so don't take shots. LSU does it all the time.
I mean, I remember Matt Flynn laying down in 2007 on the field.
Now that video is up there with this one
so
in terms of the all-time great fakes because they were so poorly done.
It's good.
From an acting perspective, very bad. But, like, I don't care from a gamesmanship. But that worked. You saw them faking injuries because they sped up the tempo. And look at Clyde, man. 120 of those 136 came in that second half. And for all the talk, like, why are we running straight into the heart of their defense? A lot of people are just completely ignoring the drive where you ran the ball like 5 times and went right down the field and scored. So my problem is if we're gonna make these if we're gonna make these criticisms, I think we have to take a full view of the context of the game. And so a lot of people are saying, well, you didn't stay aggressive. And you know what? Because of that, it came down to a close onside kick. I think that's a logical fallacy. Yes, that is what happened. But let's say you play aggressive, Jordy, and it doesn't work out, and they don't have to spend their final timeouts. Well, then they get the ball back. And then what does it mean then? Do they go down and they kick a field goal? Do they get it? So, like, you can't even say that. Like, LSU chose a strategy that made Auburn use those timeouts, and then when they got that onside kick, the game was over. So I think it's hard to sit here and say unequivocally that they did the wrong thing at the end of that game.
And I was trying to get out in front of this with Whiskey and Wine on Saturday night, was that they're 8-0 and that they won the game.
Thank you.
And that it is a really good spot to be able to complain about an undefeated team that's number one in the country that is setting the standard offensively, that you can complain about 508 yards of total offense. I mean, like, really, they had 508 yards of total offense. And yet the score didn't dictate what the numbers said. I mean, really, when you looked at everything, the time of possession, the rush yards, the total yards, I mean, it looked like the score would have been 42-20.
Yeah.
Not 23-20. But like I said, coming into the segment, I think that great teams, championship caliber teams, at some point are going to be knocked off of their identity. They will have their identity taken away from them, and they have to find ways to win the game. And I thought that's what LSU did on Saturday. I mean, you take LSU, some of LSU's best players I thought were humbled very much so on Saturday. Damian Lewis, I told T-Bob, I thought lost a lot of money on Saturday just by the way that he reacted against first-round picks, right? I mean, Marlon Davidson, Derek Brown, those guys are going to make a ton of cash to play football on Sundays. I would even throw Kenny Britton there, the linebacker who came up and stoned Lewis.
He's one that knocked out whatever. He had a massive hit in the Florida game. They called it. He's a beast. He's very good.
And so, I mean, like, their calling card was taken away from them. And then you look at what the defense was able to accomplish by stepping up and kind of taking.
Maybe that even should have been where we started, because the same, I keep saying this very internet-y sounding, but, like, I expect the same energy from everybody that's been dogging this defense all season long. I expect that, but in their support today, because you do not win that game without how dominant that defense was. And Jordy, I've been on teams where I was obviously on the lesser side of, we won with defense. But every year there was at least one game in which the offense had to show up. Like 2010, whatever, one that seems out of my 2010, finished that season 11-2. Defense was incredible. But there's an Ole Miss game where Jeremiah Masoli just had their number, and the offense had to outscore him. So this year it's been the opposite. And yet this was a game in which you had to rely on the defense to get you the win, and they did it.
Some of the stats going in that I thought LSU, it's good to take away from Saturday's victory, is that they had only trailed for 10 minutes and change going into that game on Saturday. They trailed Saturday versus Auburn for over 20 minutes. I mean, they had their backs up against the wall from their point of view. I mean, they were playing in a spot that they hadn't played with. I think Ogeron had a message. He was talking about the halftime message inside the locker room and kind of the feeling around the team going out back to the second half and talking about, this team it was good to see them in the moment growing up and maturing and seeing what they had to accomplish to get the win and get out of there on Saturday afternoon.
I think a lesser team would not have won that game tonight. They came to play, and, adversity hit us. We weren't playing very well in the first half. They got up ahead, but our guys kept on fighting. You should have seen this locker room. There was calm in the locker room. There was confidence. We felt we were going to win the game. Joe felt he was going to win the game, and we did.
It was, and I think that's really important to point out, because you saw growth. I always say it, but what reveals the true character or the true kind of limits of a team, it's not the adversity you're met with, it's how you respond to it. And LSU's response was really good. And it is still wild to me that we live in an era where LSU's offense can adjust to whatever the situation at hand is demanding. One thing I want to point out, so there's been a lot of talk about the offense and the 500 yards. How do you get to 500 yards with only 23 points? And mistakes were a part of it. Some mistakes definitely had their part. But in my opinion, it was way more about what Auburn did and not what LSU did. Sometimes you got to give credit to your opponent. And you know what Auburn did Saturday? They played excellent situational football in that when they had to have it, they got it. And they put LSU in some really tough decision-making points. Like, how many times did it feel like LSU would come up just short, like, okay, 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1, and then all of a sudden that 3rd and 1 became very interesting because you weren't always getting it consistently, and you had a lot of success.
4th and goal.
Yes, you had a lot of success between the 30s, but when you would get down in the red zone, Auburn's defense did a great job of buckling down. And so I think that's how you end up with that many yards and not that many points. I think you have to give credit to your opponent for stepping up and making those plays. The thing is, though, LSU will not face another defense that good.
No chance.
Like, there is not another defense that is as well suited to upsetting what you want to do than that Auburn defense. And it goes back to what we always say, right? It's all about that defensive line when it comes to stopping elite quarterback play. And Auburn proved that. And once again, look at that defense that Kevin Steele ran, putting 7 DBs on the field a lot of times. You can only do that if you somehow have a D-line that's dominant enough to still do good against the run. And even then, Auburn still didn't do great against the run. They ended up having to adjust. They ended up having to throw another D-lineman in there, try to rotate. And as I said, Clyde Edwards-Helaire went for 120 in the second half. If Moscona said that if Auburn has a better QB, they win that game, then that is a stupid take. Did he say that after the game? That's what Aaron Galey's in the huddle saying that.
I was a little drunk.
Because that is a stupid take.
Yeah.
What kind of illogical hypotheticals?
But you know what? For the sake of the segment, hell yeah,
I'm just saying, what kind of illogical hypotheticals are we creating in order to try to criticize the team? Like, okay, if they had a better quarterback.
T-Bob, if Cam Newton still had eligibility and he was Auburn, they probably would have won the game.
Exactly, right? Even beyond the fact that it's just ridiculous.
Emzinger told me that. Can we get rid of Gary Danielson, for God's sakes?
I actually really like Gary. We can have that conversation. Yeah, I do.
I don't know.
Dude, he's got production meetings with Emzinger for the last 3 years. He's met with the LSU offensive coordinator 3 years now, and he still calls him Emzinger?
Look, I don't know if we're the show to get on people about pronunciations. Just personally, I don't know.
Don't pick on my crew, bro.
Yeah, but T-Bob, if you met with someone the week before, like with them, you wouldn't continue to say their name wrong.
No, look, I'm not defending getting the name wrong. I just don't really get worked up about that. I'm talking about his actual analysis. I think is really solid.
Now it's coming back to me. I think he did say it.
Here's the deal. Every SEC fan base hates Gary Danielson. That shows you he's objective, right? Now, I think Brad Nessler sucks.
I agree.
I think he is
I kind of think it's a bad team.
I agree. There's no chemistry there.
I think that's what happens. Maybe he brings Gary Danielson down
Brad
for me.
Keeps saying these. Brad keeps saying these.
How are we going to forgive Danielson calling him Emzinger for 3 years?
It was for
3
every
years.
time.
Brad keeps saying these bad
What
takes.
a great name, though. Emzinger. It would be kind of a cool nickname if he meant to do it that way.
Brad keeps saying these bad takes, though, and then Danielson doesn't want to be a jerk.
I know.
And so he has to be like, well, actually, I think it's actually more like this. And kind of let him down easily.
Gary's like, Jordan Jefferson ran a great out route there. And Brad's like, I bet you Jordan's watching somewhere, Gary, but that's Ricky. And
okay,
he's
that's good on Brad then.
That's Justin. And it's like,
hey, that just shows how legendary the Jeffersons are. Here's the deal, though, to finish the quarterback take, why this is so illogical. If Auburn's scoring points at the end of the game and you're in an offensive duel, do you think you call the same plays? Like, what are we talking about here? No, you go balls to the wall to score. And are you going to sit there and unequivocally say that LSU would not have been able to outscore Auburn? That's just so beyond logical fallacy, dumb. I can't even with people today. What you witnessed was not a perfect football game in the slightest. But to be panicking about it, I think you are taking away all the wrong things. You faced your biggest toughs yet on a day when you made your most mistakes. like we said, I think special teams was really poor on the day. Penalties.
They were averaging 5 penalties a game going into that one. They had 5 penalties in the first quarter.
Yes,
on Saturday.
Exactly. And to be fair, I said it on pregame Saturday. My number one key was starting fast. Look at the A&M game and look at the Florida game for Auburn and how different those two went. And a lot of it was because of the start. Florida came out 80-yard touchdown within 2 minutes of the game. Auburn did that against A&M. Well, this game started right to Auburn's script. LSU shot themselves in the foot. Auburn ends up going down and scoring, taking the early lead. And so anytime I see it go to script to the opposite team, and then you still find a way to win, then you should be majority pleased coming out on Sunday. And more on this defense, because we just kind of touched on them, dude. The rush defense was spectacular. That was the big test.
Great.
Could you make Bo Nix have to try to beat you? And that's exactly what they did. And obviously Bo Nix was lacking in that department. Tyler Shelvin is unreal right now. And I think he tweeted it yesterday that he can feel himself becoming more and more dominant every single week. And, I mean, there's at least one clip. I saw it on Twitter. No, actually, maybe it's in Brody's article. Shelvin, he just bench presses a guy like 4 yards in the backfield. And when you look at the numbers, another situation where the surface level numbers don't tell the whole story. If you just looked at the box score, if you take out sacks, you see an Auburn team that ran for 162 at 5 yards a carry. But 2 runs accounted for 111 yards, 2 busted assignments. Otherwise, you gave up 51 yards on 28 carries for 1.8 yards per carry. And this was against the best rushing team in the SEC. And this also does bring something else to light. The play of the game, the sneaky, low-key play of the game, Grant Delpit, and the hustle play forcing, I'm blanking on his name, number 3, out of bounds when he had the clear field for the 70-plus yard touchdown. It literally saved 4 points, and it was a pure effort play. And look at the impact that it ended up having on the game. So shout out to this LSU defense and that play, which was, I mean,
is that DJ Williams?
Delpit is he's a superstar, and that was just a pure hustle, blue-collar type of play right there. A lot of people would have given up, and yet he did, like, you talk about a game of inches. I mean, he did just enough to get him forced out of bounds.
You know what the play of the game for me was the shot on Burrow on the sideline in the second quarter where he got his head snapped back, where that was the shot. You didn't know. I mean, I guess people were wondering how he was going to react. 5 of 6 passes after that, straight down the field for a score. I mean, that really kind of not woke him up because, you know, like you never think that he's not ready or that he's not ready to go, but it kind of woke the rest of the team up around him.
It made him mad.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of had the same effect that the Central Florida hit had on him
That's
last
a drive where they ended up scoring, right?
Yeah, they scored. That's where he hit Marshall.
So that was,
5
in
of
my
6
opinion,
passes he hits after that.
And that's when the O-line was still really struggling. That's another thing to highlight. The offensive line was getting dominated early on. They did a really good job of trusting in their conditioning and kind of outlasting that Auburn defensive line. And then they started to win those battles in the second half because, dude, that first half, every drop back there was pressure. And that drive, that single drive by Burrow was, I said this online, like, it should be impossible to get more impressed with Joe Burrow. But his ability on that drive to navigate the pocket under pressure while keeping his eyes downfield and making plays was professional. Like, it was absolutely spectacular. And that's what makes this team so tough, right? So even when they're not at their best, even when the O-line's losing some of these battles, the play of Burrow and everybody's kind of picking each other up in different areas like this, but his ability to navigate the pocket helped them out. And that's why stopping this team is so hard right now. Yeah,
no, look, after your video breakdown last week over at the City Club of talking about the advantage or really how skilled he is.
Yeah.
I mean, like we see Breeze do it. Brady, to me, has this type of skill set where he just takes one slide step and the field like opens up for him, right? I mean, like Breeze will take one of those one slide steps up in the pocket and his passing lanes just become clear.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Burrow has this ability to take one step to the right or the left, step up or step back, and the field just opens up. I guess the best example would be the one that you pointed out last weekend of Derek Dillon, the long touchdown pass to him in Starkville against Mississippi State, where it's just 2 steps. out of the pocket to the left, sliding over and creating more space for him to get the ball down the field.
And he flips his hips. He's going left, flips his hips. Yeah,
and
great footwork.
When you pay attention to that and watch him play, he nearly does it the majority of the time just by just slight manipulation of the pocket and creating a little bit of space and what it does to the entire field opening up in front of him.
And you love that as an O-lineman because you know, okay, even if I kind of lose off the first step or maybe I don't have my best block, if I stay with it and just try to keep a body on him, the same way that you can trust a great running back to make you right, you can trust a quarterback's ability to navigate to make you right as well.
But make no mistake about it. I think I speak for T-Bob when I say this show loves the space that LSU sits in going into Tuscaloosa, heading 2 weeks from now. Number one in the country. If we could start picking nits, I would like to be number 2 if you're LSU, just because it gives Saban just a little edge of a motivational factor as far as getting his team ready to play. But other than that, load up, take the wagons over there, square off in Tuscaloosa, which is a playoff game in early November, and LSU sitting front and center in it. I mean, let's go, man.
And I want to say this too to highlight. That was kind of a sleepy Saturday, and although, look, yes, the Florida environment, I think, is still unparalleled this year, how that game was at night. But I thought the crowd did a pretty good job Saturday. And a game where I don't think anybody's going to come away from that game being like, oh, that was the loudest I've ever heard Tiger Stadium. But they did force Auburn into about, 5 false starts, I think it was, by the end of the game. And the bottom line is that when you have a quarterback that can't make plays through the air, false starts are drive murderers. So we said we wanted to kind of keep track of the crowd-induced penalties. And so I think that the crowd also gets a passing grade for this game.
LSU had penalties 12 for 118. Auburn had 15 for 98. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
27 penalties in that game on Saturday.
It was sloppy. It was slow. CBS got a ton of commercial time, so they were very excited about. And but you found a way. To win, and that's what great teams do on days when they don't have it.